this is Father Louis Scurti with Friends of the Word. And if you think there's somebody's head blocking the camera, you're absolutely right. Today's show has to do with anonymity, and it has to do with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I asked a friend to be interviewed because she has such a keen sense of spirituality in the 12-step program. She has her own spirituality. She doesn't pray to a, quote, higher power or something up there. She knows who she's praying to, and she has brought that reality into her sobriety. So I'm going to introduce her as Lynn. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Doctor.
And thank you for being here. Okay, it's your sobriety, and it's your story. And I know you've presented to different groups, AA groups.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start?
Well, thank you for having me, and this is a little different for me to be doing an interview without an AA audience.
Right.
So it's a little awkward. I'm not sure how I'm going to go about it and what might come out of my mouth. I've asked God to speak through me, to give me the appropriate wording and such that you all as a broader audience might understand things. You know, us, meaning alcoholics, have our own sort of way and language that we all understand each other without really having to read between the lines. But for what we call you all, which are, if you're not an alcoholic, we consider you normies. You're
Normie?
yes, you're a normie. And normies, when they visit an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, sometimes get lost in the depth and the ways that we sort of, I guess, put our experiences. So just bear with me. I mean, I'm just going to tell you my story as best as I can, because it is an intense story. My story is very different from most of the general public, the garden variety alcoholic, and only such that mine is very traumatic. I have had a traumatic series of life events that have formed my spirituality, hurt my spirituality, changed my spirituality, and this is how I usually begin. I will say, hi, I'm Lynn, and I'm an alcoholic, and my life has been pretty much one long, intense spiritual crisis. And I say that because many alcoholics start into the AA program with no God, hating God, you know, have run from God because of their sins and their hurts and their, you know, just life happenstances. And it's hard for a lot of people to find God because of all this. I was one of the very few who walked into the rooms of AA, and the only thing I liked about AA was that we could talk about God. Way back when I was a little girl, I used to have a severe problem with sleeping alone. I come from a real loving family, pretty big family down in Washington, D.C. area, and my mom and dad were young and had a lot of kids quick, and there were 5 of us. And I was the only one who had this serious problem where I was afraid, deathly afraid of something, but I didn't know what and why. I did learn later in life that I was sexually abused. And this plays a significant role in who and what I became and how I struggled with life.
Did that come out in therapy?
Yes, and it also came out in the way I made relationships, because what I learned was I was exempt of what you call boundaries. The sexual abuse took away my feeling that I existed within a set of boundaries. I essentially felt that I didn't really exist. I wasn't real. And it's really sad. I look back at the little girl inside me, and I was very sad when I was little. But the thing that kept my head above water was every night I went to bed, I would either crawl in bed with a brother or sister, drag them down the hall, sit outside their bedrooms, and every night it was a hassle and a scene, and my mom and dad going, no one, let Lynn in your room. She's got to learn to sleep alone, and it was always disrupting the family.
Yeah.
And I would get in my bed and just close my eyes and be quivering, and I would hear this voice. And I'm not sure what I thought the voice was at the time, but it was pretty much a nightly occurrence. A voice, a very calming male voice, would say to me, "Don't worry, Lenny, everything's going to be all right. You're going to do something great for God one day." And it made me so happy. My heart was always with God and Jesus. And we weren't a big, strong, church-going family. We were brought up Baptist. My mom is from Mississippi. And we went to church, Sunday school, when we were little, and we went to vacation Bible school, and then, it started dwindling into Christmas and Easter and such when everyone got a bit too busy and as we got older. But I had the voice tell me all the time, consistently over the years, "Don't worry."
That voice is within?
Within. It was in my head.
Yes.
I didn't bring it up to myself.
Right.
How would I know
Right.
to say to myself, I'm going to do something great for God one day? It was a third person telling me,
Yes, yes.
"Don't worry." It was a calming, soft, but strong, knowing voice. So as I started to get a little older, life started happening. And that's when things started complicating my sense of self, which was pretty pitiful. I was a very smart kid. I studied hard, but I was quiet and reserved and such, like compared to my sister, who was very flamboyant and loud and always got all the attention, who was a year younger than I. But I say that now because it's funny. I'm not that way any longer. But but I was when I was little.
Yes.
I just didn't have the confidence. I didn't have what I was supposed to have, but I didn't know it then. I just knew I didn't know how to do life from a very young age. Like, I just didn't know what people felt like to be real. And I would think that. I'm like, I wonder what they feel like. I'd look at someone like my sister. I'm like, I guess she feels like a real person.
And you would never ask anybody, or?
Not at that point.
Good. Okay.
I started manifesting problems with the not being able to sleep alone.
Right.
And I felt like something was going to get me. But I didn't even know really about the devil at that time. I learned about the devil through the movie The Exorcist,
Wow.
which I went to when I was 12 years old. This was the start of my dark days, because as soon as I saw this movie, I related in my mind to that little girl in the movie completely. I saw myself as that little girl and that vulnerable, and I felt like, oh my Lord, I'm going to be the next one. The devil's going to come take over my soul because I don't know how to protect myself. I don't even know what I am about. I don't know. I just feel so open to it. And I didn't know how to tell anyone about this. It was a serious, dark fear. So my being afraid of something, which I didn't know, this is how children of sexual abuse handle things, which I learned from books and therapy.
Yes.
They push it, they just know they need to survive. So they change the perpetrator into anything but the real perpetrator.
The reality changes.
Right. So when I learned about the devil through the Exorcist,
Perfect.
it became the devil.
Yeah.
So I started to get very, very worried about this. And my sleeping alone became more severe. And then my mom sent me away to a sleepaway camp trying to help wean me off of this problem. She just didn't understand why I could not sleep alone. And it was horrible. I went to the sleepaway camp. I think it was the same year I saw The Exorcist, and it was I had a best friend there who was a fundamental Christian, and she would tell me that if I don't have Jesus in my heart, that I was going to go to hell.
Huh.
And
you were
had
12 years old.
12 years old, and I didn't even know what she meant by that. I took it literally, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get Jesus in my heart. How do you do that? And I'm thinking, I just didn't understand a word of it. And then I thought, I was fearful that my whole family didn't have Jesus in their hearts, and we were all going to hell.
Oh.
So in my mind, I didn't want to tell my family that this is what was going to happen, because I didn't want them to feel the fear that I felt. I wanted to protect them. So I came home from camp after calling every day saying, bring me home, I can't. And the counselors didn't know what to do with me. I had to sleep in people's bunks. If I was alone, the devil would get in my body and take over my soul. At age 14, my family's whole life started changing. We had a very serious movie-like occurrence in which my dad, who was he owned a construction company with my uncle. My grandfather, my uncle and my father all were in business together. And they built buildings around Washington, D.C. And my dad had hired a bunch of these Greek guys as drywall contractors to do a job one year. And he had no clue, but they were part of what was considered a Greek Mafia. And they did try to extort money from my dad and my uncle, his brother, which entailed asking for a lot of money that they weren't owed, and it started at something like, 25 grand, not too much. And my dad had no idea what he was dealing with at the time, and said, I already paid you, get out of here. And within a few weeks, it escalated, and the violence and threats started to come in very harshly. And
you knew about this going on?
Well, at first we didn't, but then we had to know, because it got really crazy. They called this is when it really took a turn for the, absolute, out of the norm stress. My dad got a phone call at 3 in the morning, and the voice said, basically, your brother's going to be dead in 15 seconds. And of course, my dad did exactly what they expected him to do, which was hang up the phone and start calling his brother, my uncle. We lived on one side of the Potomac River, and my uncle lived on the other side of the Potomac River in Virginia. And my dad started calling him, like, frantically.
Right.
Got to get him up. Wake him up. What is going on? And he never picked up the phone. And my dad heard a blast from across the river, miles and miles away. They blew up my uncle's house with all my cousins in it.
Whoa.
Front page of the newspaper. Miraculously, no one died, because they lived in a huge farmhouse. The bomb they planted was under a corner of the master bedroom where the phone was. So they had, this was all done professional. They knew what they were doing. They wanted my uncle to get up and answer the phone when my dad called, and he would have been right where the bomb would have gone off, and they would have blown off the back of the house with my uncle in, the explosion.
Right.
But he didn't wake up. He didn't get out of bed.
Wow.
And they had a front and a back staircase. In old farmhouses, they had both. So they had a staircase to go down the front of the house. It was all, black and fire and all that, and they had pictures of them, holding on and piggybacking down this darkness. But we started having to travel around from hotel to hotel. We had the FBI, we had guard dogs, we had guns, we lived in people's basements. They said they were going to kidnap all the children. They were going to kill my mom, open the front door, and bullets would fly by her head. I mean, this went on and on until we had to leave the country. And meanwhile,
And you're how old?
I'm 14 years
14
old.
now. Oh, God.
Yeah. And my mom and dad's relationship was horrendous. My mom constantly screaming, you know, it's all my dad's fault, just pay these guys. And the FBI saying, no, you cannot pay these guys. And my dad would stick my brother in a closet with a shotgun and say, shoot whoever comes to the door at a hotel. I don't care if she says she has towels and she's
Right,
the maid.
right.
Blow her away. And we had never heard this kind of talk.
Right.
My dad walked around with a gun, and it was horrible. So
It sounds like a novel.
it was. It was
But it was
crazy.
real.
It was real. No one could play at our house. You know, we
Sure.
we had a big fun family, and we had guard dogs around our house, cameras. I could tell you a zillion stories that sometimes we laugh about now and tell.
Sure,
But
yeah.
the sad part of the story is that these guys were caught. They were caught across the border in Canada by the FBI, and they all went to prison. It was a ring of 13 guys, and they were deported after they went to prison. But the aftermath was that my dad died of a massive heart attack. A few months after they were caught, he was only 40 years old, and my mom lost it. She had a breakdown and pretty much had agoraphobia. She couldn't leave the house. She thought that the Mafia guys were going to come back and take revenge.
Sure.
We had the police at our house every weekend, and my mom also, by the way, was more or less a 1950s mom. She had never done the bills, so life became very chaotic and surreal, and none of us handled it very well. And basically, I really, really was questioning God at that point.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Perfect. Wow. Okay, for our audience, you've heard a background of one person who eventually becomes an alcoholic, but we'll find out about all that. But God was the only consistent person in her life that she could find a source of stability in. This is Lynn, and we'll be back with part 2 of Lynn's story, how she maintained her spirituality and found God through AA. Thank you very much. Let me hear from you. Father Louis Scurti at hotmail.com. God bless you.